Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of the Nonprofit Technology Conference 2015. It's hosted by NTEN, the Nonprofit Technology Network, and we are in Austin, Texas at the Convention Center. My guest is Tom Moberg. He's an independent strategic technology consultant, and his workshop topic is moving your files to the cloud, options, obstacles, and obligations. Sounds a little ominous on the obligation side. Tom Moberg, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll get to talk about all three. We got plenty of time together.
Good.
So, I don't know, maybe it's not so ominous, but there's obviously things to be thinking about. Lots of things are in the cloud. Why might files make sense for a nonprofit?
For a while, email's sort of been the big thing to move to the cloud, and that's there have been a lot of good options for doing that. And as people have been more comfortable with moving to the cloud and using tools that both from in their personal lives and in their work lives, it's started to make sense to have their files available more remotely in various places, and to be able to get access to things beyond the walls of their office. And the tools available to do that have been evolving and getting better as well. So the other piece that's made this start to happen is that for a lot of smaller organizations who may have had big file servers, those take a lot of effort to keep moving. And as your file server needs to be upgraded or updated, one option is to say, we're just not going to do that anymore and pay those costs. We're going to move our files to the cloud and be able to access things a little bit easier. Could also be a distributed environment. You might be have employees who are off-site, virtual organization, and that may be a stimulus also. It is, yeah. In our the session this morning, we had a lot of. That was one of the things we talked about. Why do this? Why are people doing it? It ran. There are a lot of different reasons, but. Some people said, well, we have 60 locations where we're trying to have people work. Yeah. And trying to have 60 servers or one server that everybody tries to get into remotely it's very hard. So if they can use something like Office 365 or Google Drive or Dropbox or Box, that can be a really good option.
Okay. And can we talk about some of the tools later on? Okay. Yeah. All right. Again, I didn't want to ask you anything that you didn't prepare for your workshop, but if we can talk about some of the tools, that'll be helpful. Yeah. How do we start to make this plan? Well, is there anything more you can say about how we should, what we should be thinking about to decide whether this makes sense for us as an organization? Yeah. Like what questions we should be asking ourselves, maybe? Yeah. There's lots of questions, and lots of that was sort of in my presentation, the whole obligations thing. Like how do you not make your staff cry? That was what we were talking about. Yeah. Because you don't want to make them cry. That's sort of a rule at nonprofits. And doing this kind of project, moving files from where people are used to getting them to someplace else, can freak people out a little bit. Yeah. And so, how do you do that in a good way? And so your organization first, like you were saying, needs to figure out why do we want to do this? Why does this is this a good idea for our organization? And again, it can be a lot of different things, but often it's about doing it in a way where we can get access to the things we need to be able to do our work and meet our mission. Do it in a way where people can get at things from wherever they are, and that they can have some assurance that the files they're working with are the ones they should be working with. That it's not, there's one on my documents folder and there's another one here and another one there. So, what's our next step? Are we ready to think about what tools are be appropriate to do this after we've now made our decision that it's going to be beneficial to us? Yeah. I think if the organization has said, okay, this is the direction we're going to go. Part of what I was talking about was, it's more than just a thing to do. It's a project, and so having a project plan, is really important. And part of that is the tool selection, and we can talk about that. Some of the other things that really need to be thought through are things like, what's the timeline
that that you're going to use to do this kind of project? Who are the people who are going to be involved in it? Are we going to try and do it in-house, or are we going to use consultants to help out? Mm-hmm. And are we going to have certain teams that are going to be kind of internal champions that are going to help do this, which is something I recommend people doing.
Oh, so you get some early buy-in from some key people, or maybe key teams or something?
If the accounting department has an accountant who thinks this is a good idea, it's going to go a whole lot smoother than if you don't have somebody there doing that.
Okay. Oh, so some key allies.
Yes, indeed. Makes this kind of thing much easier.
Okay. Go ahead.
So then we can talk about tools if you want to move to that. Some of the options. Or?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's. You mentioned Office 365, Google Docs, obviously.
Yep.
Drive, Google Drive.
Yep.
Dropbox. Box is Box a variation of Dropbox?
It's not, and we have to be a little careful because we're here in Austin. And what I didn't know before I came here is that this is the home of Box. So Box is a company that has a tool that is sort of like Dropbox. The differentiation I've heard before is that Dropbox kind of started as a consumer tool, and Box started as more of a corporate organizational kind of tool, and they've kind of met in the middle a little bit. Box offers more consumer stuff. Dropbox now has Dropbox for business. But so Box is here, and
okay. Now is Box 1X or 2 or 3? They're not triple X, are they?
They are not, probably as far as I know, just 1X.
Okay,
just 1X.
We're in a booth next to Flux, and they're 2Xs.
Wow.
So, but Box is only 1X.
But Box is only 1X. Yes.
Just so people can find it.
And and they are here at the conference.
Okay.
And so their tool is something that you can download a little application that can be on your desktop, so you can synchronize things to your desktop. But there also is the web interface for it that's very very useful. You can look at the files that are there. They have some viewers where you can view some files online, and you can even be on the web portion of it. And if you have the correct application on your desktop, it'll open up the file from the web in your desktop, and then when you do a save, it saves it back up into the web.
Big differences you see between Dropbox and Box, aside from their culture and where they began and how they migrated to the center?
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things. One of the things I've seen, and we saw this in the session this morning, is that because nonprofits are who they are, Dropbox has been free. Just the plain Dropbox has been free, and so people have gotten comfortable using it and use it in organizations, whether the organization knows about it or not. And so,
what do you mean? How could you be using it if you don't know about it?
Well, what I mean is that you, as an individual employee, may have found something like Dropbox useful in getting your work done, but the IT department, if you have one, may not know that you have it. One of the quotes that I put into the session today was that what I've found is that people will get their work done one way or another. And that means whether they use the tools you give them.
With you or against you.
With you or against you or without you or whatever happens.
Okay.
And so some problems that nonprofits ran into using Dropbox is that it's a personal kind of thing, and staff can leave, or maybe it's a volunteer, and then maybe those files disappear too. And so Dropbox now has Dropbox for Business, where the organization can have some control. People can still use both their personal Dropbox and the business files that are being shared with them. Mm-hmm. But if they leave the organization can stop access to those files, so they have some control. And Box has a similar thing. They just it's been a pay service, and so I think fewer nonprofits have used it in the past. But many of them are learning they need some of this control, and that makes both those products useful, and they both have nonprofit discounts too. I should mention that.
All right. Let's move to Office 365.
Yeah. It's a big one, and partly it's really big for nonprofits right now, because it used to be if you were a nonprofit and you wanted to kind of move to the cloud, especially with email, the player was Google, because that was free. You could get Google Apps for nonprofits for free. But last year, Microsoft made a version of Office 365 free for nonprofits as well. And so, especially for nonprofits that are Windows-based, it is a very attractive offering, and it's basically a big server in the sky that you can interact with. So there's the email piece. Outlook works very well with it. And then there are kind of two parts of the file storage piece. One is called OneDrive, and OneDrive for Business. And then there's SharePoint, or SharePoint Online is the piece that's part of Office 365. So if you have Office 365, you can use both of those tools. And at least at this point, what Microsoft says is that OneDrive, which has pretty much unlimited storage, it's kind of your new My Documents area. It's for you to have your own personal files, and if you want to share them out with someone, you can do that by the individual file. Mm-hmm. And then SharePoint is more for creating an organizational structure for your documents. So you have document libraries within a SharePoint site, and you can upload files and have them available to people. And in both cases, you can synchronize back to your desktop also. SharePoint's been around forever as a server-based tool, and the SharePoint Online is a cloud version of it, and it's very powerful. It can take a little bit more setup to be able to structure everything the way you want it. And
do you need to be expert user to set up SharePoint?
I think Office 365 in general has fairly easy administrative controls, but the more IT knowledge you have, the more functional you can make it. So having some kind of IT advising on it, I think, is good, whether it's an internal person where you've maybe sent them to get some training, an external person, whatever it is. It's pretty straightforward, but there are things here and there. And with this file piece, we talked about this a lot, and we had a lot of stories come up this morning in the session. There are some limitations of how you need to get your file. If you're going to move files into SharePoint, especially, there's some limitations you have to watch for.
There's the migration.
The whole migration piece, there's how long are the file names and the directory structures, what kind of files can move, how many can be synchronized back to your desktop. There's some limitations in there that you need to be aware of, or else you can have some surprises as you move into the process.
What about the document tools in Office 365, Word, PowerPoint, etc.? Mm-hmm. Are you getting sort of a light version of those compared to what you'd see on your desktop?
Yes, you are, but for all of this, and especially Office 365, it has been evolving, and they are putting a great deal of effort into augmenting those tools and making things as useful as possible. So Word Online, PowerPoint Online, Excel Online are very useful, and you can get basic editing done in any of those. If you want to do more things, create a table of contents or some of the more detailed document kinds of things, it's easier to use the applications themselves.
Okay, all right. What about Google Drive?
Yeah, it's been around a long time. We also, when I had people raise their hands about what tools are you using in your organization, the same hands came up for multiple things. What's happening is that all of this has been evolving a lot, and I think people are still trying to get some kind of getting a handle on how to manage files as they go to the cloud. So
they're adopting everything and seeing what works best for them?
I think so, and I think it's this push-pull of staff, again, trying to get their work done and using tools that, maybe they find someone who has shared something with them from another organization in Dropbox, so then they put Dropbox on their desktop so they can do that. Now they're using that. And Google Drive has been around for a while, Google Docs, and so people are comfortable with it, and so it's one of those ones that a lot of folks are using. The quote I had from Google in my slide was, for Google Drive, was designed to work with Google. And to me, if there's a caveat, that's the caveat, is that it's best if you want to kind of go all in with Google Docs and Google spreadsheets and Google Slides and things like that. It's a little bit easier to use other tools if you're going to use straight Microsoft Word documents and things like that. You can still store those things in there, but it's a little easier to kind of go all in with the Google stuff and then use those.
Geez, do you see us getting to a place where there's Google Docs and there's Microsoft and Office Docs? I mean, which would be which would be counterintuitive to the way most of computing is going.
Yeah, I think they'll keep trying to support each other and still trying to keep their own thing. So that there is some way to bring in Word documents into Google.
Yeah,
and things
I
like
know.
That.
I understand.
So,
you're not saying it's impossible to do. It's,
right.
But you get the maximum benefit, maximum management tools if you're using the native Google Doc with Google Drive.
Yep. And so Microsoft's trying to kind of push you into Office 365 by doing things like building in access from the Word application that you run on your desktop, building in a way to grab things from Office 365 directly in there, so that communication is as easy as possible, so that they'll try and kind of have you work with all of their tools.
What about some obstacles to avoid? That's a part of your topic too.
Yeah.
This is the ominous part, wasn't it?
The ominous.
This is although the obligations were. No, I said obligations were ominous, but let's start with obstacles. What do we want to keep an eye on?
And really, when I said obstacles, some of what I meant was things to think through. It's the issues to kind of think through before you start doing a project like this.
We talked about those.
And so we talked about sort of the file preparation and migration piece, but there's other things to think about too. Training for your staff is going to be a big thing. What's the schedule going to be for people? When is the change actually going to happen? People are going to want to know where their files are. Are they here today and over here tomorrow, and then it didn't work, and then we're back over here again, or how is this all going to work? And bandwidth is another one that we talked about. So we're talking about the cloud, we're talking about the internet. Now we're moving files back and forth from, not just on our own network, but through the internet, which we have a little bit less control over. But we can try and have as much control as we can get. So thinking about how good is our internet connection, not just the download speed, but also the upload speed, because now we're pushing our changes up.
Yeah.
So that's important to think through. And the other thing that I end up talking to people about is, so you're moving to the cloud, maybe you're using Salesforce and Office 365, so all of your important data is on the internet. What if your DSL line goes down? Or is everybody just done for the day? You send everybody home. Or do you need to think about getting both a DSL line and a cable line, and then maybe a box that can kind of coordinate the two things? If one goes down, you go to the other, and things like that. So trying to think about how can we make sure we are online all the time starts to be a kind of a bigger issue for folks.
We haven't talked about security. This was a huge issue when the cloud started to become popular. I don't see it getting as much attention now, but it's still important. I mean, especially if we're talking about CRM, our database.
Yeah.
That could be credit card numbers, dates of birth.
Yeah.
Lots of personal information.
Yeah, I mean it's huge, and
potentially depending on what you put there.
Right, and so there's sort of a due diligence that needs to be done on whatever vendor you're going to go with. Microsoft has a whole website about how it treats security in Office 365. We had somebody bring up in the session this morning that they had gone with, I think, Box, because it specifically talked about HIPAA compliance, and that was important to them. We kind of have to agree that the NSA is just going to look at all of it, so I guess we take that out of the picture. But it sort of depends on both your organizational culture and the kinds of data that you're dealing with to see how important that stuff is. And I will say at the same time, we need to be thinking about it, and it's not a new issue. I still run into places where there's the file server with a notebook with the password to get into the file server sitting right next to it.
Yes,
So, it's new and it's old.
We're going to leave it there. All right? It's new and it's old. That sounds like a good place to stop.
Okay.
Tom Moberg is an independent strategic technology consultant, and you are with Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of the Nonprofit Technology Conference 2015 in Austin, Texas. Thanks very much for being with us.